Well, it's 12:05 p.m. on December 2nd, 2025. This is the WeThePeopleMeet.org weekly meeting. Today we have a guest with us, Eldon Stahl. He's the coordinator of the John Birch Society for several states, including Utah. And he has a lot of experience discussing issues like the Council on Foreign Relations and their influence, as well as the conversation today, which is the presidents and whether they have engaged in um, military operations without having congressional approval according to the Constitution, and what kind of rulings by the Congress have served to allow that temporarily, and how those have been possibly abused over time. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. A little bit about our group is we organized originally as a Democrat, a Republican, and an independent. The goal was to coordinate, facilitate conversations, almost Kirk style, although we didn't really know much about Charlie Kirk at the time when we started, but really to try to understand each other's positions and just try to make it so that there's less, bring down the heat a little bit, the tension level, because if we can discuss things respectfully between people that disagree, without getting upset and try to see each other's viewpoints, then the hope is that we can get to more rational discussions and have less polarization between, Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, liberals, etc., and see the good points and maybe find common ground in the process. So that's the purpose of the group. And and over time, it seems like we've had a lot to discuss. We never run out of discussion point things to talk about. And last meeting we had, it was me and Kent Bowman. I've been more of the opinion that Donald Trump has done almost exactly what every previous president has, as far as military operations that may not have full congressional approval. And my opinion has been that the reason why it seems like he's doing more is because the news media is more critical of Donald Trump on his strikes against Venezuelan boats that are bringing drugs over to the United States, mainly because he's not part of their inner circle. He's not part of the Council on Foreign Relations. He doesn't hang around those crowds as much, and when he does, he usually is critical of them, their globalist policies, their goal for a new world order. He's been really anti those types of things. So that was my stance. Kent Bowman was of the impression that he's done a lot more military operations than previous presidents. So we had a challenge. I said, well, I'll put together a list of things that previous presidents have done, and we can kind of talk through some of those issues a little bit and see if the previous presidents really did do things that were outside of congressional approval. And so I did some Google searches and searches online, and um, I'll bring up first, I'll tell you a few that I found on Google regarding Biden. So airstrikes in Syria and Iraq. February 2021, it said that in response to rocket attacks on U.S. personnel in Iraq, Biden ordered airstrikes against facilities used by Iran-backed militias in Syria. The administration cited the president's Article 2 authority, asserting the right to defend U.S. forces without a new congressional vote. Airstrikes were again conducted against Iran-backed militias on the Iraq-Syria border. So that was kind of the start of what I was looking at, and just wanted to see, what you feel as far as, or what you've thought about those types of things, strikes that Biden did, or if you have others in mind that he went against congressional authority to attack other countries militarily.
Yeah, I think really this is in a way a very confusing, or you could say contrived discussion,
Mhm.
because it's disconnected with an understanding of the principles and the history that our founders of our country understood. And when we disconnect ourselves from them, it really becomes just a contest of opinions rather than something that is based upon real, principles.
Yeah.
And so, um, I think we need to get first back to some very basics, some very basic principles upon which our country was founded.
Okay.
Now, this idea should be hopefully appealing to both Democrats and Republicans and most independents, at least. The idea that we should not have a king in the United States. Uh,
Mhm.
Basic understanding of the history of the United States was that we broke away from the tradition of having kings. That if you look at the history of Europe, it was a complete mess, a complete disaster, the tradition of having kings and vesting them with powers that were unaccountable, often abused. And one of those key powers was, of course, the power to declare or decide whether or not to commit troops into hostilities, um, which we would just call war, right?
Yeah.
We would call that war. And um, the founders looked at that history in a nutshell, and they said, you know what? We've noticed throughout history that the kings have been the most disposed to going to war, to
Yeah.
committing troops to into hostilities. And we need to, um, in the interests of all that is good and holy and moral, to put that in the hands of people that are more directly responsible to and accountable to the people. Because the people are the ones ultimately that have to pay for, in blood and treasure, any decision to go to war, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what they did is during the Constitutional Convention of 1787, they said, we're going to place that power in the hands of Congress, of the legislature, the lawmaking body. The question of whether or not we will, um, of course, for one thing, declare formally that the normal relationship among nations or between nations
Hmm.
is going to be disrupted, and we're going to use means that normally would not be used. For example, great destruction of property, of lives, and such as that. Um, and we're going to temporarily suspend that respect among nations to bring back some sort of sense of sanity because there has been a loss of that with regard to certain nations between ourselves and other nations. That's something that was put in the hands specifically by the founders, in the hands of Congress to make that decision, not in the hands of the president, nor was it given for Congress, the representatives of the people and of the state governments, to authorize or delegate that decision to the president or an international body. Um, and you'll see that in the history of our declarations of war. We have declared war 11 times. And just to give you an example of uh, declaration of war, okay? Um, in the Declaration of War in 1941, what it said was, yeah, see, I should have this up. It's take a look at the wording of this. Okay. Um, we declared war against Japan.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I'm bringing up the speech here, but um, that the Congress, of course, declared that a state of war existed between the United States and Japan, but also it directed the president, not authorized,
Okay. Hmm.
right?
Yep.
It did not say we trust the the discretion of the president. It said, we direct the president
Mm.
to carry out war to a speedy and successful end, to end these hostilities.
Uh-huh.
So clearly, Congress was in the driver's seat in that
Mhm.
situation.
Yep.
Congress was calling the shots, deciding whether or not we would go to war. And that's very much in line with Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution, which says Congress shall have power to declare war. And if
Mhm.
you look in Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, which deals with the president's powers or the executive powers, it says Cong the president shall be commander in chief. Now, this is the part that people often omit. When called into the actual service of the United States. And who calls them into the actual service of the United States? Well, it's Congress because they decide whether or not we go to war.
Mhm.
Often the question comes up, well, what if we have a sudden attack? Shouldn't the president have the ability to do that? Yes. In the Constitutional Convention, uh, it was recognized and very sensibly that, yes, in a sense, some of the powers of a king would be left in the president in that, um, or you might say the advantages of an executive, of a single executive, rather than, they considered having, three presidents or whatever. No, they decided to have one. But the advantage of that would be to be able to decide quickly in those circumstances that there is an urgent need to defend ourselves and to leave that discretion or that power in the hands of the president. However, anything going beyond that in an offensive manner,
Uh-huh.
uh, and of course, any thing such as a preemptive war, that would have been out of the question, right?
Yeah.
Um, that would be uh, any offensive type of thing that would have to be left in a deliberative body, which would be the Congress. And so when we bring up the question of, well, did Congress authorize this or that war?
Mhm.
Arguably, whether or not it's explicit or not, anybody can pretty much say, well, yes, Congress authorized that. But is that the standard under which our country was founded, and is that a standard of liberty? So if you're a person that wants to have liberty and depart from the tradition of probably thousands of years of kings and other despots getting the people into war and causing so much unneeded and unnecessary bloodshed and spending of treasure, then your answer would be no, that doesn't meet the the standard that was set for a free people by the founders of the United States and by we the people when we. Uh-oh, did I lose you?
Yeah, I think I don't know if it's on my end or your end, but we froze up for a second,
Oh, okay.
but I can hear you great now.
I
And
see. Yeah, you have Obama's. So yeah, we can look at specific cases now. For
yeah,
example, Obama had drones. He was famous for that, right?
right. Yeah.
Okay.
And this is the Council on Foreign Relations. They were saying he inherits a targeted killing program that has been the cornerstone of U.S. counterterrorism strategy over the past 8 years. And so they had put together, let's see when this was. This was dated January 20th, 2017. So that kind of
Mhm.
explains why 2017 has zeros on it. But they're showing how
Mhm.
many number of strikes, total killed, number of civilians killed, and percentage of civilians killed in each of the areas from drone strikes. And this is it says targeted killings. Interesting. He reportedly told senior aides in 2011, turns out I'm really good at killing people. Didn't know that was going to be a strong suit of mine. So,
Yeah, it
um,
was very rather a flippant. comment, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Considering the consequences of what he's talking about.
Hmm. And
And, you know,
sometimes there's a lot of civilians killed. So
sure.
even though it says targeted, only one out of the people killed in Pakistan in 2006 was not a civilian. That's kind of doesn't appear to be targeted too well in that case,
Yeah,
but that's just Pakistan. Then we go
that's
down.
a nice euphemistic type of a thing to
Yeah,
describe what really would be called war by any
right.
rational definition.
Killing of thousands of people, I think would be war.
Yeah.
You've got Yemen down here. I'm guessing that these are. I haven't researched enough to see what these LWJ means, but anyway, it gives you totals by different countries. Somalia, 309. I think it might be based on different groups reporting here. TBIJ
Hmm.
and whatnot. So there's two reporting groups. Um, but this is just specifically talking about drone attacks, this article. And when was the last time we officially declared war from Congress?
1941, I believe it was, with Germany.
So we have not declared war.
42 may have been
And
in early
we've
42.
there's been different types of things that have been used to justify it, like the 2001 AUMF. Can you tell me a little bit about what that is?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So in 2002, Congress passed a resolution, and actually, pretty sure I have it right here.
Do you want to share your screen, or do you want,
Yeah, I can do that.
or
Let
you
me
could.
make sure that, yep, this is the one
Okay, I'll
from
allow screen sharing
91.
for you. You can share your screen if you'd like it. I
Okay.
think.
Let me see if I can pull that up.
Okay.
Um, if we can zoom in on that.
You'd have to click to share your screen if you want to on your.
Uh, okay, so oh, how do I do that? On my
If you go to the toolbar from the Zoom, there's a share button, and then you can
yep,
choose which screen you want to share.
I did that, but it's not, huh, maybe
And maybe I can just pull it up too. Let me
maybe
see.
it's not. Yeah, it's just
Should I search and then I can pull it up here?
yeah, it's joint resolution. Let's see. Well, okay. It's public law number 102-1, uh, but House Joint Resolution 77 is what it was from 1991.
Let's see.
So either way,
Is this it? Public Law 102, Congress.gov. Let's see. To
yep,
authorize the use of
102
United
dash.
States Armed Forces
Yep, yep.
pursuant to United Nations Security Council Resolution
Oh, there we go.
678. So already I don't like it because it's in response to a United Nations resolution rather than, which is a globalist group that really, I believe, has started to try to get us towards a one world government in the end, to try to slowly move us that way. So anyway, we're reacting to a United Nations Security Council resolution. And you want to go
Yep.
talk a little more about this then?
Yeah, right. And so right there, that's an indication that we're already departing from what the founders had in mind as so far as who should be able to make these decisions.
Mhm.
Uh, uh, Deferring to the judgment of an international body composed of representatives of various nations across the world
Mhm.
is not the uh, not the vision of the Declaration of Independence, right? The Declaration of Independence said right at the end what constitutes being a free and independent states, the ability to make war or
Mhm.
to conclude conduct war, and also conclude peace
Mhm.
and engage on our terms in commerce with foreign nations. Just those were three specific things that were mentioned at the end of the Declaration of Independence. If independence means anything, and
Yeah.
if we value our independence and want to celebrate it, then no, we're not deferring to other nations or anything like that to make such decisions.
Yep.
But this right off the bat says we are deferring to other nations, right?
Yep.
And so, just like many resolutions, it has a lot of whereases basically saying, here's why we are making this decision, this official resolution, declaration from Congress. And then at the end of this resolution, it says, well, here's what we decided. Resolved by the state Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled. And then it goes going down just a little bit. We'll see what they decided. So just scroll down a little bit. There we go. Okay, so here's what they decided. Um, Section 2, letter A, authorization. The president is authorized, subject to subsection B, to use United States Armed Forces pursuant to United Nations Security Council uh, Resolution 678, in order to achieve implementation of Security Council resolutions, and it lists off what, 10 of them?
Yeah. Yep.
Um, okay. Is that a good idea to delegate that decision making to the president? Is that what the founders had in mind? Or to put it
And
another way,
uh,
did the founders have in mind for the Congress or the people through the Congress to give the powers of a king to the president?
mhm. Well, and even worse, again, I'll kind of repeat. They're giving him the power to do this in order to satisfy all these resolutions by the United Nations Security Council, basically
Yes.
moving
And
our
that's,
sovereignty over to the United Nations, giving the
yep.
president the power to um, do things on behalf of the United Nations, put us into war on behalf of the United Nations goals rather than the goals of the American people.
Yeah, right, right. That adds insult to injury, really.
Mhm.
Um, and so that doesn't really make it okay.
No.
Um, Now, the reason that I like to point out to people, the reason that we've gone astray from what the founders intended, in a lot of ways, can be traced back to 1945. The end of 1945,
Mhm.
Congress passed a law called the United Nations Participation Act.
Uh-huh.
And that was to implement the treaty that the Senate had ratified called the United Nations Charter.
Okay.
And that was for entering in, of course, into the United Nations. And what it says in Section 6 of the United Nations Participation Act, very specifically, it says the president shall not require the authorization of Congress, or shall not be required to get the authorization of Congress to provide armed forces uh, pursuant to essentially Security Council decisions.
Can
So,
I pull that up too?
yeah,
What job for
yeah. Just type in United Nations Participation Act of 1945, or United Nations Participation Act should be sufficient.
there we go.
And then
Okay.
you'll want to look up the text of it. Avalon, I think, should have it,
That
but
would be
GovInfo has kind of like it was amended, a few years after and added, but with it, this one at least will show you Section 6. So
section 6.
basically,
Hmm.
yeah, this refers to um, articles within the United Nations Charter, which is kind of like the Constitution of the United Nations,
Uh-huh.
ratified as a treaty. But the United Nations Participation Act was to put in federal law or statute, you might say, how we'll actually implement on a national level this agreement, this
Uh-huh.
treaty. Okay.
So
Um,
this was basically at the end of World War II, right?
yeah, right after World War II ended. Yeah.
So um, kind of kind of a moving power, giving more power to the United Nations, basically. Amendment of United Nations Participation Act of 1949. Okay.
Yeah.
So it is
It
the
was
purpose of
amended
this is the
49.
purpose
Yep.
of this act to make it easier to go to war on behalf of the United Nation goals also as I could see that that one we looked at before was, the Statute 105? Is it very similar in that way?
Um, well, yeah, certainly it makes it easier. It puts specifically into federal law, although I would say it clearly violates the U.S. Constitution, the spirit of it that
Uh-huh.
the founders had. But yeah, um, it makes it so that um, in in federal law, the Congress authorizes, it spells out how it authorizes the UN Charter to
Hmm.
be implemented uh, by the United States government.
Okay.
So that was the purpose of the UN Participation Act.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
and so it refers in several parts to various articles in the Charter of the United Nations 42. Um, so Section 6 says the president is authorized to negotiate a special agreement or agreements with the Security Council which shall be subject to the approval of Congress by appropriate act or joint resolution, providing for the numbers and types of armed forces, their degree of readiness and general location, and the nature of facilities and assistance, including rights of passage, to be made available to the Security Council on its call for the purpose of maintaining international peace and security in accordance with Article 43 of the UN Charter. Okay, so clearly, when you say on its call, we're giving the authority, illegitimately, of course, to an international body to decide where and when and how to deploy and implement and use United States military forces.
Hmm.
That is a clear violation of a basic principle of independence upon which our nation was founded.
Hmm.
Um, and then it further goes on to say, I mentioned this before, the president shall not be deemed to require the authorization of Congress to make available to the Security Council on its call in order to take action under Article 42 of said charter and pursuant to said or to special agreements or uh, to special agreement or agreements, the armed forces facilities or assistance provided for therein. So it it even makes things worse.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
Describe
and
what that meant. That was a little over my
sure,
head.
sure. Yep, yep. Um, so if Congress makes an authorization, you might say a law that says we agree to provide X number of troops to the UN under these circumstances, what that little sentence says there is, well, the president doesn't need to go back to Congress to get authorization to do that, to
So
deploy those
the
troops.
combination of these two items, acts, statutes, whatever they're called, they pretty much give the president to go to war anytime, anywhere, as long as the United States Nation Security Council backs it.
Yeah, that's right. That's the basic effect of it.
Uh,
At the same time, it also gives cover to the president and to Congress to say, well, see, Congress authorized this
the
and
previous
it's
Congress, it wasn't
legitimate.
us. It's a statute. It's in
Yeah,
place forever.
right,
I have
right.
nothing to do with that. I wasn't in Congress back then, and
Yep.
so all these people being killed across the world, and so now if the United Nations was a very wonderful group that we all agreed was wanted peace and wanted freedom throughout the world and was just jumping in when they were supporting uh, people that were fighting against dictators that were trying to hurt the people of each country, then still that's still giving our sovereignty away, but at least it'd be for a righteous group. What's your take on
Yep.
whether they have had righteous intentions or good intentions or freedom promoting intentions over the last since 1945, 80 years?
I think the record is very clear. If we
Mhm.
look at the United Nations, it's full of countries that come from governmental systems that would be some form of state socialism.
Uh-huh.
If you look at who founded the United Nations, uh, one of them was a open communist from the Soviet Union. Another one was a closet uh, communist agent from the United States called Alger Hiss, and they drew up the United Nations Charter.
Hmm.
Um,
And Alger Hiss was a closet communist, but not anymore. I mean, he's well known as a communist now. Spy, actually. They
yeah,
took him
right.
up to say he was a communist spy. Hmm.
Yep. Yeah, he was engaging in espionage, and he was very instrumental in the Yalta agreements that, wrapped up so many consequential things at the end of World War II,
Hmm.
um, and gave so much over to the Soviets, not surprisingly. And so now, but it only came out, um, after Whittaker Chambers testified and outed Alger Hiss as uh, a an agent of a foreign hostile regime, the Soviet Union,
Yeah.
um, that he was ultimately convicted of perjury
Hmm.
because the statute of limitations had run out on treason,
Uh-huh.
but really he was a traitor, and
Yeah.
that was the best they could do.
Yeah.
But you look at the United Nations. What have they done to bring about world peace? I would say the world has been very unpeaceful.
Hmm.
Um, They, a lot of evidence showing, yes, they looked the other way. For example, when the Rwandan genocide happened, that was, millions of people that were killed.
Yeah.
Um, they have been pushing uh, some of really the foremost pushers of two big things, which I think most, at least conservatives, would be concerned about: uh, gun control
Hmm.
and abortion, or more broadly, population control.
Hmm.
That's the United Nations.
Hmm.
Right now, their big thing is uh, basically socialism, Marxism wrapped in a green package with the Agenda 21, or renamed Agenda 2030. Essentially, you could say Agenda 2030 is all these nice sounding things, which, when you boil it down, can only be implemented by establishing an all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-invasive government in the name of, let's bring about world peace. Let's have people educated, have access to water. All those things sound really good.
Yeah.
So yeah, the United Nations up legitimized now with help, I think, of people that were in the United States government, communist China, the biggest mass murdering regime in the history of the world, at least so far as we know,
Hmm.
killed estimated 100 million. We really don't know under Mao Zedong.
Yeah.
So, um, hope I don't know. That's
Yeah.
I could go
And
on pretty,
mhm.
hopefully that at least establishes pretty convincingly that yes, the United
What's the
Nations is not freedom
connection?
loving.
What's the connection between the Council on Foreign Relations and the United Nations?
Oh, so just some basic history. Many of your listeners probably heard of the League of Nations, or World War I, and after that, when President Woodrow Wilson pushed for the formation of a collective security arrangement,
Hmm.
and they called it the League of Nations.
Yes.
Now, it was formed, but the United States Senate debated for months whether or not to join it, and they ultimately decided not to. The League of Nations withered on the vine and um, just fell apart. In response to that, a man named Edward Mandell House, who was a key unofficial advisor to Woodrow Wilson, pushed with
Basically, his
others,
right-hand man.
right-hand man,
Yeah.
yep. He pushed to have a new organization started in, I believe it was 1921, officially started, called the Council on Foreign Relations.
Yeah.
Allen Dulles, John Foster Dulles, those were some key founding members of it. And their main push was to get the United Nations finally involved, or the United States involved in uh, a similar arrangement, which they ultimately decided to call the United Nations. But it was basically a rehash of the League of Nations formula. And they knew once the U.S. got involved, then it would be a much more stable and influential ongoing organization.
Mhm.
And so that's what they did. And they during, those 20 years roughly, they infiltrated heavily the United States State Department, especially to get people of their mindset into um, international relations types of arrangements. And so and today the Council on Foreign Relations still exists. It's really within the United States the foremost proponent of what uh, internationalism, globalism. There's different things we call it today. Certainly, we could lump that into under the heading of deep state because it only has about 4,000,
4,000.
maybe 5,000. I think it's not even 5,000 members. And you look at their uh, membership roster, which anybody can look at. Actually, they publish their membership roster,
Mhm.
and people that are very influential
Yeah.
all across the country.
We've gone through the influential list.
Yeah.
Google or Wikipedia actually has a really good list of
Oh
influential
yeah.
of our members that we've gone through in this program. So yeah. For lack of time, I want to move on to individual president examples, and let's start with the one today. That we've been talking about that's kind of gotten a lot of media attention, and that is Donald Trump's attacking the drug cartels sending boats over the United States with drugs in them, and just shooting them down. Um, in a way, so is there congressional approval? Is it an act of war? I believe it is. Is
Sure.
it congressionally approved? At least we're not following some United Nations Security Council resolution in doing it. That goes against my beliefs entirely. I truly believe that Donald Trump is trying to protect our country. So at least on the outset, it has a good purpose to stop the deaths of so many people from fentanyl and other drugs coming into the United States. And so is it a good thing? There's a lot of ways we can look at it, but it, is it going to save a lot of American lives? Is it good for America? I believe getting less drugs in the United States is good for America. Are are we justified in killing a few people on boats to save? I don't know how many lives are saved from each boat that doesn't come with all these drugs on it. It'd be interesting to see stats if we have stats of drug overdose deaths going down over the next few years if Donald Trump is successful in reducing the amount of drugs in the United States. But on the outset, is it a good thing? I think the argument could be made it's a good thing. Is it constitutional? Is it an act of war? It seems like an act of war. Has Congress declared war? No. There is a resolution by Congress saying that we are um, in a war on drugs. That's very, very soft declaration of war on drugs without any direction for the president
Mm.
to act on it. It's just saying that we are in a war on drugs. So I think anyone that
Yeah.
says that this is going against the Constitution has good justification in saying that. They could argue that we're killing innocent people. There might be some people on those boats that don't really know what they're doing. I don't know if that's really logical to think that they don't know they're bringing drugs to the United States. I'd be surprised if anyone on those boats is completely innocent of that fact, but maybe they're being forced by their drug overlords to do it. Who knows? But they're dying. So there's different ways you can look at it. What's your view on it?
Well, yeah, this is a kind of a unique one because it's what you might call an unconventional attack on the United States,
Mhm.
of people bringing in drugs, or at least accused of bringing in. It's difficult for the average person to really verify that or not.
Yeah.
But in the spirit of at least what the founders had in mind, there would be at least some discretion to the executive to repel sudden attacks. Um, and in you know modern America, yes, I think you could at least say that these are plausibly, arguably, people that are engaging in a form of warfare on the United States. Uh, One of the things, though, in this particular case is we have lost sight of the power in Article 1, Section 8 of Congress having the power to issue letters of marque and reprisal. This
Uh,
is a kind of a long lost power in a way, not used very much, but essentially it was used against non-state actors, people non-connected with governments. And of course, there's a big argument as to whether these drug folks in these boats are connected with a government. But um, the letter of marque and reprisal would be Congress saying, okay, go after, for example, these pirate ships, which are attacking our merchant vessels,
yes.
and
That was
specifically
Thomas
targeting,
Jefferson, right? Are you
yeah,
referencing
Thomas
that? Mhm.
Jefferson, right? And so it wasn't a war, wasn't declaring war, but it was authorizing specific contracted people to um, carry out specific assignments to defend the United States.
So do you think Thomas Jefferson was within the realm of the Constitution in those attacks against the pirates back in his day?
Yeah, yeah, sure. That was within the realm. He wasn't trying to um, do like nowadays where just okay, let's look for an excuse to go to war.
So what's the difference
Um,
between what
but
he did and what Trump did here? What are the main differences, if there are any?
um, well, it seems to me pretty similar, but the thing is nowadays, like right now, as we speak,
Hmm.
there are Trump is entertaining the idea of let's have a land offensive in
That.
Venezuela
Mhm.
to try to overthrow the president and other officials of Venezuela.
Mhm.
Well, obviously that would get into the territory of offensive campaign rather than a defensive campaign,
Yeah.
which would, as the founder's standard would imply, um, require Congress to make that decision,
Yeah.
rather than, um, just the
Oh,
president saying,
yeah,
we're,
I
we're
want to talk
gonna
about
we're
that
gonna
for a
go do that.
second. Venezuela was a very rich country, a lot of
It
oil
was,
resources, until they got infiltrated by communists and they
yep,
started taking away the right to property. They started overtaking businesses that were successful, pulling them into the government, and taking away people's motivation to build successful businesses because they'd either get killed and have their business taken over, or they'd be forced to give their business to the government. And within a few short years of communist infiltration, people were dying on the streets of starvation because no one was motivated to farm because they'd get killed or have their business taken away if they farmed too much. And so it's clearly an awful situation that I'm really skeptical of our government. I wouldn't be surprised if our government was instrumental in that whole transition happening, or the CFR, or all these
yeah.
state
There's been a
groups.
lot of meddling in in
Yeah.
that part of the country or
Almost,
world, right?
almost every time I've seen a country go down in the last 50 years, it's been with the help of deep staters from our country. Anyway,
Yeah.
so to have Donald Trump try to go and undo that now, maybe that would be good for that country, but it would be our people losing their life to help another country. And who's to say whether it's good what he's doing or not? You know what I mean? From my
Hmm.
perspective, it's better than what happened before. That doesn't make it right. And Congress would have to have declare war before that's a legitimate thing that Donald Trump would do. So even though I think there is a deep state enemy that has poisoned the world throughout, including poisoned our country in many ways, that has hurt Venezuela and the people there, especially. Trying to make things right now, going against the Constitution is probably two wrongs doesn't make a right type deal. And I believe the United States has enough power that if we were really for freedom, and got out the sickness, the cancer in our country, aka the CFR, the deep state, all these groups that the military industrial complex, which they call it, the groups that benefit off of wars throughout the world, the international bankers that support these major groups too, get that whole influence out. I think the entire world would have been at peace by now had we not had this poison in our country and just used our influence. Tariffs like Trump is doing, different ways of
Yeah.
influencing other countries to treat their people good and to motivate free elections, freedom of speech, all the freedoms that we value here. I believe the entire world would be at peace had the poisons not interjected there. And I believe it's biblical or at least scriptural. An enemy hath done this. Yeah, and that might
Hmm.
be a Book of Mormon reference. I can't remember, but what happened to my vineyard?
Yeah.
Well,
Ezra Taft Benson wrote a book based on that verse, right? And
that's right. It was called An Enemy
from
Hath
the
Done This.
parable of
Yeah.
the wheat and the tares.
Yeah, I think that we would have a whole different world. So I think Donald Trump sees an injustice, goes and tries to fix it, but he's not a constitutional scholar, nor does he like being controlled by anyone. He's got many weaknesses personally that are obvious, and including recently I heard him use the R word,
Hmm. Yeah.
don't even like to say it, but he called someone retarded,
Hmm.
and that's very inappropriate use of the language for a president to use. And he has a lot of flaws, but I believe he's at least trying to do what's best for America in what he's doing, as opposed to the presidents in the past. I believe have been controlled by there's a lot of evidence that they've been put into power by the Council on Foreign Relations and the deep state, and they just have kind of been puppets acting on their behalf. But I wanted to go a little bit. So if we start with President Trump, definitely he's doing things that are kind of pushing the lines of the Constitution and talking all the time about doing things that really break the constitutional law. But let's go back one president at a time. Did President Biden do this? This is strictly from AI Online. Uh, the U.S. launched military strikes without explicit congressional authorization in Syria and Iraq in 2021 against Houthi targets in Yemen starting in 2024. And a very quick search it isn't hard to find these kind of strikes without congressional approval from probably any president in the last 50 years. Would
Hmm.
you agree with that? That every president has broken this rule since 1950s?
Well, at the very least, they've gone against what the founders intended.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and they try to put kind of a fig leaf on it a lot of times and say, well, this is defending the United States. Well, you know, i- it's not very difficult really to establish, okay, are we trying to, is there a war going on? Are we evacuating United States citizens out of a war-torn country with special forces or something like that? That's very
Mhm.
different than, taking sides in some internal dispute.
Right.
That has nothing to do with the United States, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Well,
but
and
they,
if you look at it, the AUMF, which is what we talked about also, um, the justification for that, Congress has some people in Congress have said, hey, this is too much. Biden shouldn't have been able to do this without
Mhm.
congressional authority. And the War Powers Resolution of 1973 was also used as a justification for many warlike actions of previous presidents. I don't know much about that. Do you know much about that?
Yeah, so in response to the abuses of war-making powers in the Vietnam War,
Mhm.
the War Powers Resolution was passed by Congress, and it was kind of heralded as, "Hey, we're reining in the executive power to make war." The only problem is, um, you know, it did not really treat the U.S. Constitution as the supreme law of the land, which specifically says that that decision as to whether to go to war, with the exception of, clearly defensive actions, would be in the hands of Congress. What
Mhm.
it said was, the president, you can go ahead and do basically whatever you want, according to your discretion, But after 60 days, the Congress has to weigh in and see if we're going to rein you in.
So it gives them
Uh,
specifically 60 days.
yeah, 60 days.
Okay.
And okay, well, after 60 days, who's going to want a vote against what the president basically a war that the president already started? Because of course it's going to be, well, don't you support the troops, right?
Right,
Don't you aren't
right,
you unpatriotic if you don't support this war that the president's already got us into?
right.
So it really passed the buck to the president in the name of saying, well, we're reining in the powers of the president. But did it have accountability for the Congress? Well, not really. Didn't have. So it was still fell short, certainly, of the idea of not having a king and the idea of having that power, a very important power, in the hands of people that are directly accountable, much more accountable to the American people.
Mhm. Okay. So let's look at
So,
Obama again. So
yeah,
his interventions in Libya through NATO, apparently, and criticism. Many in Congress, including members of Obama's own party, denounced the action as unconstitutional, arguing that the sustained campaign clearly fell under the definition of hostilities and required congressional authorization. A bipartisan group of lawmakers even filed a lawsuit against the administration. So clearly, Obama was, at least according to a lot of people in Congress, going against their powers in his
well, yeah,
attacks.
yeah, and what they do here is they say, well, um, once the horse is already out of the barn,
Hmm.
then Congress will say, we don't think this is really legitimate. Let's go to the courts and have them decide. Well, frankly, Congress already has the power to decide, and we don't have to go through the courts.
Yeah.
It's called impeachment. We have the ability to uh, impeach and remove the president for
Hmm.
violating the U.S. Constitution, and this would be a very appropriate example of an instance where that would be um, a good route to go down. Congress can do that.
Yeah. So let's see. Uh, Obama also had 2014 strikes against ISIS in Iraq and Syria. We remember those attacks happening. Critics
Yep.
argued that the 2001 AUMF did not legally cover the new conflict against ISIS, and many in Congress criticized the president for bypassing legislative authority to expand the war. Then of course, we've already looked at the drone strikes. We looked at that CFR website article about that.
Hmm. And
Criticism strikes for criticism, strikes for a lack of transparency, which transparency is very important. At least I'm seeing transparency in what Trump's doing. He's probably very proud of it, as he is of most things that he does, right? So,
yeah,
anyway.
well, I mean, it's nice. Transparency isn't a bad thing, but if we're saying, okay, transparency does not trump constitutional requirements and constitutional limitations of power. Just
Mhm.
saying, hey, we're out in the open with our treachery or our
Yeah,
treason
right.
is not exactly what the founders had in mind and what a free people should tolerate. By the way, NATO is a regional arrangement of the United Nations. So if we're doing something in the name of NATO or CETO as it was with the Vietnam War,
It's
um,
also covered by those same provisions
yeah,
before
it's
that we
also
mentioned
under.
before.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And the AUMF basically back in 2002 that said if the president in his discretion feels that he needs to use force, the Congress supports him in that effort. So it gave a blank check to the president to wage war, illegitimately, of course.
Yep. So we've looked at the last three presidents. We could probably, maybe you could mention, and we could bring up, look at the ones further back from that. So we've got Trump, Biden, Obama. Before that, it was Bush Jr., right?
Yeah, Bush Jr.
Can you name off the top of your head a couple of things that he might have done without congressional approval?
Well, there was the Iraq War, and that one, they basically did the same thing as they did with the Persian Gulf War, almost the same wording.
Yeah.
But they said, Uh, we authorize this to be done in the name of enforcing Security Council resolutions from the United Nations.
Hmm.
And if in the discretion of the president he feels this is necessary, we support him. Um, Basically, the same wording was done with the Persian Gulf War with Bush Sr.
Yeah.
Um,
And the only one we're
yeah.
missing now is Clinton. I can't remember off the
Well,
top of my head.
there was
What's he?
Kosovo and
Hmm.
Haiti.
Hmm.
Haiti was under the United Nations, as far as I recall. It started as a humanitarian effort to feed people and then it morphed into quickly, well, Somalia, I guess, is another one under Clinton, right? It morphed into let's overthrow the government and install a new president.
Yeah.
Uh, Obviously, that was going quickly into the offensive, which should have been, uh,
Which
you
country
know,
was that again?
well, Haiti.
Haiti. Okay.
But
And
also, we ended up, trying to feed the Somalis and then all of a sudden fighting against warlords, fighting gangs and things in Somalia.
mm,
But then there was Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, um, those places where, the former Yugoslav um, republics and countries were warring against each other
mhm.
or among themselves. And President Clinton decided, okay, let's try to weigh in on this, send troops into there and try to settle this. Well,
Was that part of the
that was
UN
under
effort
NATO.
too, or was that just him acting on his own? I don't know.
Um, I'd have to look on that, but either way, it wouldn't have been, something declared by Congress. It was an offensive type of a thing.
Hmm.
I think it was under NATO,
Okay.
but I'd have to look for sure. So, yeah, there's plenty of presidents that have decided, and it's not surprising. I mean, the founders, they looked throughout history and they said, well, the president or the executive is most prone to war because look at all these advantages and gains of power that he gets when he goes to war. So if we put the decision-making power of whether to go to war in the hands of the executive, what are we going to have? We're going to have more wars and more people are going to die. We're going to spend all our money.
Yeah. And that goes back to the Council on Foreign Relations, which was really encouraged and founded at the benefit of a lot of the bankers that benefit from these wars by loaning money to foreign
Sure.
powers. And so, there's a lot of momentum among the wealthy and influential and elitists to have these wars and really going against the American people's interest and sending their sons and daughters to die for the benefit of the elitists and the world government proponents.
Yeah,
So
very good point. Right. All this kind of interlocks, right? Interrelated.
yeah. So anyway, when it comes down to it, it looks like most of our justification for going to war is through the UN. The assumption is the UN is a good peacekeeping organization, so we're going to support it. We're going to go to war to protect peace. But in the end, if you really look at it, it does the opposite. And it wasn't constitutional in the first place to say, okay, the president can just go to war without congressional approval as long as the United Nations supports it, which was founded by communists, socialists, and elitists that really don't have the American people's interest at heart. So that's kind of a summary of how I view
Mm.
this kind
Yeah,
of
really,
down.
I kind of I try to back away from the wording of, congressional approval because that gets to be a bit murky. And what the founders had in mind is, if we're going to go to war and hostilities, Congress needs to be the one that makes that decision, not
Yes.
not just delegating that decision making to the executive or an international body even.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we've strayed far from what the founders had in mind, and really we're kind of flirting, more than flirting, with having a king in the
Right.
United States.
Right. And I've said in these meetings before that we really do have an oligarchy, I guess, with the which is a group of people acting as a king or acting as fascists, where they control everything through the media, through the schools, the colleges, the schools, the education, um, definitely through government. The same groups are in control of everything in the United States that in many ways, and so even though we don't have a king, we have a secret group that and or elitist group that controls
Hmm.
everything. And
Right.
one last thought before we have to end. I got to go soon, but what's your thought about the group that said, okay, we're going to go tell the military that they can disobey orders of the president, encouraging dissidents within the army or within the armed forces. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, in principle, yes, a person can do that and should be able to. They're instructed, at least initially, when you join the military, that yes, you can and should disobey um, unconstitutional orders.
Right.
In the practical sense, to implement that, it gets very difficult because often you're subject to court-martial and having to go through that process.
Hmm.
Um, but yes, they swear an oath just like our, military leaders do, and our president and the Congress to uphold and defend the U.S. Constitution
Yeah.
against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Um, but why should we place all the burden of making that judgment as to whether something comports with what the founders had in mind or the Constitution
Hmm.
uh, has clear meaning on the backs of those that are not very able, generally speaking, to stand up. I mean, there's grave consequences if you stand up against orders of your superior when you're in the military.
Sure.
Um, so if there is a legitimate thing like Michael knew, you might remember him back in '90s. He said, "You know what? This is getting crazy. I'm not going to wear a UN blue beret. I'm not going to have a UN patch. I'm not going to be under UN command from some guy from Turkey or Azerbaijan or whatever. I joined the US military. This is way out of line."
Yeah.
And he stood up. Um, but he really had a hard time. He was court-martialed. He was not given an honorable discharge that I recall.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it seems like though the people that are saying this type of thing are pretty much the anti-Trump people, saying, stand up against unlawful orders at this point.
Mhm. So there might be some
Um,
political
yeah,
motivation more than just, hey, let's follow the Constitution.
right. Of
Well,
course we should follow the Constitution. Yes, and everybody should.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's kind of a
Would
there's
would those same
there's
people have
what's
stood
on
up
the
against?
surface and what's behind.
Right, right. Would those same people have stood up to twice as egregious of actions by a president that was part of the deep state? Probably not. I would say.
Yeah,
I would say that if it was someone that had deep ties to the Council on Foreign Relations, then these same people would be defending their actions. I would bet, even
probably.
if they're
Yeah, yeah,
twice as egregious. That's
yeah,
from what I've seen in the past and what I'm sure I'll see in the future is that that would play out. But anyway,
yeah.
all right. Any other thoughts before we end up? I appreciate you joining.
Oh gosh, thank you so much for having me on, and hopefully this gave some food for thought for your watchers and listeners.
Uh-huh.
Because this is a very consequential issue. We, as the people, are the ones that pay dearly in time and treasure and especially blood, whether it's ourselves or people we love, for the abuse of this very consequential power in, going to war.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate your comments and your insights, and I think I might send this link anytime anyone's arguing about, hey, should we be doing this war? I think this was a good explanation of when we should or when we shouldn't, or what kind of authority needs to be given to do that. So this will be a benefit to me to be able to share the link to this video to friends or whoever is arguing in the future about this big issue, which, is a big issue no matter who the president is over the last, over the life of our country. So anyway, thank you.
Okay,
Have a
great.
good day
Yep,
and
feel free.
appreciate
Whatever you
you
want to
joining
do.
today. So,
Okay. Yeah, thanks so much, Rob.
okay, talk to you later.
Appreciate it. Yep.